Now, if you're like me and you've played a lot of video games over the years, you would have played them on big TVs, small TVs, handhelds, consoles, maybe on a portable screen, something in the car, on your Switch. You could have even played it on the big screen at the MCG. I remember they used to have Mario Kart there, or at Marvel Stadium, or some sort of huge, humongous screen device. But what about a projector in the comfort of your own home? Today, that's what we're going to be looking at with the BenQ X3000i. We're going to be doing a review and let you guys know whether it's worth your time and your money. Now look, it's not often you get to play games on a screen the size of your wall, so when you're setting it up, obviously, you want it to be nice and simple, and if you love numbers out there, then the X3000i gives you 4K 60 FPS, as well as getting up to 240 frames per second if you're playing on a 1080p output. I just want to point out that all the footage that you're going to see today is taken with a couple of different cameras, so you might see some difference in display of what the projector produces in terms of frame rate. It might look a little bit blurry. Reason for that being, lots of cameras have difficulty in low light settings. With a projector, you need that super low light, and also it has an ever-changing light setting, which can be difficult for some cameras to keep up to. Because I had absolutely no issues with frame drops or frame skips or blurs or whatever while playing using the X3000i. Another key metric to keep track of is your input delay. And if you're playing on 4K, you can expect to see about 16 milliseconds of input delay, and on 1080p, you'll see around about 4 milliseconds of delay on your input. Now, those numbers aren't too bad. Given I can compare this to playing on a huge screen at the MCG where the input lag was close to half a second, you don't really notice the impact of playing with such minuscule amounts of input delay. It might be slightly noticeable if you're playing a first-person shooter game like Call of Duty, but for the most part, it is pretty much spot on to what your input is when you're playing, and it doesn't feel like it's impacting you too much in what you're actually playing, which is great. Now, it's something that's super easy to set up. It basically is as plug and play as a TV. So all I had to do was plug my PS5 into the back into the HDMI and turn the thing on, which is great because you want that ease of use when you're setting it up. Now, I was using it on a PS5 running in 4K for the games I was doing it on which were like FIFA, Cricket 22, God of War, Ragnarok, even The Witcher 5's PS5 remake, and even a bit of Rocket League, which I don't think runs in 4K, but still looks super clear. And you just notice immediately how clear it is. When you're using a smaller display, even in 4K, it's hard to kind of grasp the quality of the textures and the artwork that you're taking in. Whereas when you're seeing it on such a big scale, everything looks better. It just looks so clear and so good. And I think that's something the X3000i does super well, is just, it looks good and it feels good when you're playing it because there's not that huge amount of input lag. Which brings me to my first point, and that is lighting setup. If you are using it in a room that does get a lot of natural light, you'll do your best, obviously, to block that out because it works best in the ideal light setting of basically no light. Like if you've got a pitch black room and just a projector running, that is what you are looking for in terms of how you want the output. But if you were in a room that does experience a little bit of light leakage, or even a room like this where I've got the setup of the lighting and things like that, it may not give me my picture perfect display behind me because things might look a little overexposed, or they just won't look as clear as you want them to be in that ideal light environment. So that's probably one downside of having a projector versus a screen. Now, we did talk a little bit about input lag earlier, but let's go into specific genres of games and whether or not it impacts those games while you're playing. For me, mostly I was playing sports games, whether that's FIFA 23, Rocket League, or Cricket 22, and I really didn't find anything noticeable that impacted the way that I was playing. Even a game like Rocket League, which is all about precise movements through the air to hit the aerials, I wasn't noticing anything that was impacting the way I played. In fact, I actually thought I was playing better because I was playing on a much larger display screen and I felt more in control of my movements because I could see a bit better. And that takes us to this next point, which is that this is a projector built specifically for gaming. So it does have different modes, including a sports gaming mode, which is the one that I was probably using the most. Now, the differences in the display modes are subtle yet noticeable if you are playing across different genres. So for sports gaming, it does its best to emulate what you'd see on a broadcast. If you're playing an RPG, it's trying to give you that cinematic look for how you're playing. And if you're playing a FPS, it's just going to give you as clear a picture as you can, because obviously enemies are going to be like hiding in the darkness. So getting those low light settings correct is critical for FPS games. So the difference between the two modes when I was playing obviously FIFA versus when I was playing God of War, definitely noticeable in terms of obviously the settings of each game, but in terms of how it's displayed and trying to give that more cinematic feel when I'm playing God of War or even The Witcher's PS5 remake, just depending on like the display of what we're looking at. And it does give you that different vibe. So I think it is really good that there are those established differences between each mode, depending on each game you're playing, to give you just a little bit of a different experience for each game and make sure that you're getting the best gaming experience you can, I guess. Now with each of these modes, whether it be sports, FPS or RPG, they also have their own different sound settings to come out of the speaker from the projector. Now this is something I didn't find myself using a heap because I just found if you're playing games, generally you're going to be using a headset, which I was plugging into my PS5 controller or to my console itself, because I felt like the sound coming from the speaker probably isn't what you would want if you are going to be using such a big display. Something that you want to set up probably with your home studio, if you've got a home theater system or a big Bluetooth speaker that you can pump it into, which I found had a little bit of input delay on the audio for the Bluetooth, but I think that's generally just how most Bluetooth devices are, and you get a bit of input with that. So it wasn't something I was using too much, because unless you're pumping out the volume on the projector speaker to a super high volume, it can be a little bit like muffled in terms of you can't hear things super clearly, especially dialogue. So I think your best bet would be just to plug in a home theater system if you can, using an optical cable, and it would complete your setup to a T. Now, of course, many of you will want to be using this as a general use projector to watch your TV, to watch movies on and things like that as well. And it can double up as that. For me, I just plugged in my Amazon Fire TV into the back. I can boot up Netflix, whatever I wanted to through that. And it really displayed super well, especially on the movies that I was watching in 4K. Or, you know, plug in your KO or whatever it is that you want to watch your live sport on. It actually makes it a really good addition to, you know, a man cave or something like that, where you are going to be watching a lot of group activities on, or playing like a big session of Mario Kart, you know? I think that's somewhere where the X3000i can excel above a TV, is if you are hosting big group events at your house and you have the good setup for it, this is where this will come into play a lot. So the good news is, if you are using it as a general use for just TV and movies as well, it does a fantastic job, and the display is just as clear as you would get if you're playing a 4K 60 FPS game. Just make sure you got the internet to be able to stream things in 4K. So let's have a recap here. In terms of quality, you can play games in 4K at 60 FPS on your PS5. Phenomenal. Does a great job. And in terms of input lag, it's not a noticeable difference that is going to ruin your gaming experience, which is key. On the downside, if you don't have the perfect display settings in terms of lighting in the room that you're using, it can hinder your experience a little. Plus, it just has those little extra details that gives you different choices of settings depending on each game you're playing, whether it be sports, FPS, and RPG, which does enhance your experience just a little bit more. And it's great for general purpose use, whether you're watching movies or TV or whatever it is you want to watch on your projector. In terms of accessibility and ease of use, it's something that's super easy to set up, plug and play, put it on a table, shoot it onto the wall, sorted, no issues there. And if you need to mount it to the wall or the roof, pretty simple as well. Audio is probably the one major flaw that it does have, which, you know, doesn't stack up compared to the quality of all of its other areas. But that's to be expected. This is a visual display device. Get an audio specific device, whether it's a headset or a home theater system, if you want to use it for this projector, I would say is my preferred option. Summing up, given how much you're going to spend on a 4K TV these days, if you're spending it on a 75-inch TV because you want something that's big, that's going to fit in your man cave, and you're probably spending a few $1,000s on that, this stacks up as a genuine alternative to that. Now, granted, it is still a little pricey if you aren't looking for something that is extravagant or extraordinary. If you're looking for, I guess, a more basic setup. But if you've got a speaker or a home theater system you want to pair it with, it does make a huge difference. And it's going to take your viewing and your gaming experiences to the whole next level. You'll never want to go back to something smaller once you've played on your wall. If you've got any questions or anything else you want me to answer about the Projector, or you want to check it out for yourself, there is a link in the description to go to the BenQ website and see more of the specs and things for yourself. But otherwise, thank you guys for checking out this review. Thank you to BenQ for sending the X3000i for me to check out. And until next time, I will see you guys later. Goodbye.